So here we are again. It's In Conservation with. My name is David Lindo, also known as the Urban Birder, and tonight is sponsored by the Diputación de Cáceres, which is the tourism board that looks after the northern province of the Extremadura even region of Spain, southwest Spain. Great place for wildlife, and also Leica Sport Optics. So thank you guys for sponsoring this. And before I actually carry on, I just want to mention that if you wish to see any of the previous 115 In Conservation with interviews, then you can do so not only on YouTube, but at my website, The Urban Birder World, or if you become a member of the Urban Birder World community, you can not only get to see all these interviews with the Q&A bits at the end, which are really sometimes very fascinating, but you can get a whole host of discounts and various bits and pieces, plus a ton of freebies. So if you want to do that, there's the address and the link in the chat. Okay, well, last week was a momentous week in the birding world, not just in the UK, but it had ripples all over the planet, and that was the news that the institution that it is, or was even, the British Birdwatching Fair, also known as Bird Fair. Oh, by the way, someone's got their mic on, so please turn your mic off, please. Tom. So basically, the Bird Fair, and also known as the Birders Glastonbury, there was an announcement made by the Rutland and Leicestershire Wildlife Trust to say that the fair, the actual event, will be no more, which is a real shame. Here tonight, I have the co-founder of the actual event, the co-founder, Tim Appleton, who co-founded it with his colleague and friend,
Martin Davies.
Actually, Martin Davies. Sorry, because I've been looking at this screen. I'm seeing this word Tom up there. I'm kind of, I'm getting a bit lost here. But anyway, Martin Davies. So please welcome along Tim Appleton. How are you and where are you?
Hi. Well, would you believe it? I'm in Rutland, of course. My home for the last 45 years since I moved up here from Slimbridge, working with Peter Scott to start the Rutland Water Nature Reserve. And so really I'm here for the second time speaking to you, actually, David, which is really exciting. But I think this is a key moment in a lot of people's lives, that we're now looking at the possible demise of a global event that we started over 32 years ago. But leading up to that event, of course, I was developing the nature reserve. I was looking at where, and I've always wanted to use this type of event to sort of inspire people. It's been my sort of mantra ever since I worked for some amazing people in the conservation world. Sadly, several of them now sort of no longer with us. But, I'm trying to carry on that train of thought to get people really involved. And we've always said, we must put people almost first before we put the wildlife, because once we inspire the people, then they'll go out and love the wildlife. So that's been my sort of goal in life. And, I remember going about 34, 35 years ago to an event that country people in Britain will know of, called the Game Fair. And the Game Fair is very much for shooting, fishing, outdoor activities. And it was massive. It was actually huge. And thousands of people were sort of going from one marquee to the other. And I looked for something about nature and conservation, couldn't find anything. So I came away with this idea, well, if you can have a game fair, why can't you have a thing called a bird fair? So I guess I'm sort of responsible for inventing that rather simple word. But it then triggered my train of thoughts, because I think it was a time when I was thinking, well, I've done so many years at Rutland, do I now move on? But, for all sorts of reasons, I live in a lovely cottage and, sort of family and everything all around us. So I spoke to Martin Davies, who at the time was the regional officer for the RSPB in one of our local counties, local areas. And he's very innovative. He was always sort of looking at ways to inspire people. And he'd done some television programs with woodpeckers and people looking at woodpeckers through hides and that sort of stuff and putting on. So we got together, we went to the local pub here, which some of the regular Rutland bird fair goers will know as the Finch's Arms, most appropriate. And we discussed this idea, wow, how can we put this together? How can we actually, have a sort of, do we call it a trade fair? Do we call it a bird fair? Do we call it a gathering of, a festival or whatever? So we decided, first of all, we'll call it a bird fair. But we don't have any money. The Wildlife Trust that I was working for had, very little money whatsoever. And the RSPB weren't really too sure about this sort of thing at the time. So we basically went to a guy called Bruce Hanson from In Focus, who again was very inspired by what we were proposing. And through his contacts in the optics business, he then sort of said, right, okay, we know a lot of people, optic companies that go to different nature reserves to show their binoculars or telescopes. If you've got somewhere where people could do that, I'm sure we can inspire one or two of them to support you. Well, dear old Swarovski Optics came up immediately and said, wow, this sounds amazing. Here's £2,000. And that £2,000 literally gave us the confidence to sort of start the first bird fair way back in 1989. So from there, I don't know what Tom's doing, but Tom is now on full screen. And have I lost you, David?
No, I'm here. It's just that I had myself on mute.
Okay.
I was just going to say it's a long history there.
It's a long and very passionate history. I think that's one of the things that I've taken through my life is if you're going to start something, you put your whole soul and heart into it, and we could see this working for so many people. And initially it was very small. It was just one or two little tents, marquees. I had television down and a recorder, and we showed videos in one little tent. Somebody else was making nest boxes in another, and we got one or two companies to sort of come along and sort of show their different wares. Bird feed. At that time, the sort of if you like, the eco-tourism side of things was still relatively small, and it was never our, I guess, ambition that it would sort of, if you like, eventually become, I wouldn't say dominated, but it was certainly a very important part, and we'll probably call and discuss about that a little later on. But what it was doing was, first of all, bringing people together. And initially, from UK, then slowly more people came in from Europe. And I remember I've got a wonderful picture somewhere of a guy from Palestine, a guy from Israel, a guy from Jordan, all pouring over one of the marquee, or not the stands in one of the marquees. And I thought, wow, this is quite incredible. Here's sort of 3 or 4 nations that are probably at each other's politically, and yet here they are, loving birds, getting to know each other, sharing their passion. And so that really, again, I think encouraged me to sort of do more and more to bring people together and widen the whole idea of what this bird fair could eventually achieve. I also just wanted, last thing very quickly before I want to tell you about 3 or 4 projects, but just to say it wasn't just going to be this trade fair. It was going to be very much a gathering of people, hence the little group I've just mentioned, but it was also going to be a way of us raising awareness and hopefully raising money for conservation projects. And initially Martin and I sort of thought, well, we'll be able to manage this, we'll be able to do this, and for the first 2 years, we raised money for the Stop the Massacre campaign in 1989 and 1990, actually in Spain, down in Doñana. And then, of course, we went for 3,000 one year, £10,000 the next year in 1970, which was a lot of money at the time. And suddenly we felt, wow, this is getting too big for us. We've got full-time jobs as well, managing the reserve, managing the Starters Bird Fair. And I had this idea of ospreys at one point, that's come later. And I suppose that's when we turned to Martin's connection, because of course the RSPB is the BirdLife partner in the UK. And we said, look, you know, we've got this great show, we've got this great event, it's going to bring lots of people, raise money. Let's select some projects. Tell us about some projects. And that's how it all started. And so we carried on. Well, one of our great early projects in Europe was saving the steps in Spain. Absolutely incredible. You know, that's now still protected huge areas. But I just want to move right to the end because, you know, from those early days of £3,000, you know, we were eventually raising well over £300,000 for international conservation projects. I mean, quite remarkable that, you know, I can read out a few of them just to give people an idea. You know, we started in places like Romania, Spanish, Poland, Halmahera, you know, wow, that was a major move. You know, how on earth could people even conceive making us taking them from little Rutland out into Europe and then even to a place, Halmahera, where the heck is that? And we raised that year £45,000. And so it went on. We went into Ecuador, Cuba, Brazil, Peru, as mentioned, Halmahera, Africa, Ethiopia, and so on and so on. But, you know, suddenly the whole picture was changing. Here was this event raising huge quantities of money. So the projects got stronger and stronger and more meaningful. And if you can bear with me, I just want to read out 4 projects that I'm specifically really proud to, you know, think that, you know, in a little field in Rutland, we raised, for example, in 1 year for the Save the Albatross campaign, £125,000. Now, let me just read you this because this is the latest. Albatrosses are the most threatened group of birds, with many dying on the baited hooks of longline fisheries. Bird Fair funding launched the Global Seabird Programme, which paved the way for the highly successful Albatross Task Force. Members of the task force work alongside fishermen on board their vessels, changing techniques, technology, and minds. Since it started in 2005, there's been a 90% reduction in albatross bycatch in South Africa, and one of Namibia's most dangerous fisheries for birds has seen a 99% reduction. Now that happened in a landlocked field that we saw the potential. BirdLife just at the time were unable to get the money. No one was prepared to back this albatross campaign. And, you know, Bird Fair, that's just one example. You know, Jim Lawrence, I know, is with us today. And Jim's is one of the main key people for the Species Champion programs, which raises, again, millions of money for conservation projects. You have Species Champions and you have Species Guardians. You know, the Guardians do the work, the Champions provide the money. We've worked in areas where we've helped clear non-invasive species, you know, some of the islands off South Pacific, you know, incredible, you know, really, really important things. And sadly, now, as a result of the decision that's been made, I can see this sort of funding coming, hopefully not to an end, because obviously we need to look at how we may be able to do something for the future. But the strength of this bird fair, just for the conservation project that we've supported, let alone the hundreds and hundreds of businesses that this bird fair launched by the 80 countries or so represented who came to promote their businesses. And I think, sadly, it's things like this that have really been lost in the decision being made to terminate the bird fair.
Yeah, I mean, you know, as I was saying, as you said, and as many people have said, you know, there's this whole journey has been a brilliant one in many respects for getting people together, as you say, and also for launching 1,000 ships, not only in terms of projects for conservation, but also other ideas involving the participants or attendees of the actual fair. Since I think, you know, I want to get to the actual crunch of it really now, because basically, you know, it's over. There was an announcement made last week, and to be honest with you, I found that announcement, that press release, rather lame personally. But anyway, it's over. And there's been lots of talk online about, resurrection, or let's start a whole load of small local um, bird fairs around the country. But when you look back in history, I mean, I think, and then please correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel that there's been a lot of attempts, not only in the UK, but also outside of the UK, to emulate what Bird Fair has done. And in terms of, not so much in terms of raising money for conservation, but more in terms of the size and the perceived sort of, richness in terms of people coming to this event. And I think personally, it's clear that the Rutland example was unique because it was situated in a part of England where many people can get to it. And also it was in England, in Britain, which I think has a different kind of way of looking at these things to other countries. And you started this whole thing in the UK, you were leading the way. And there were a lot of small bird fairs and festivals and what have you going on all through the years. I remember one near Birmingham. I mean, there was one the other day in the northwest, in Lancashire. Do you think that could now take off again? Do you think that that could work now? Because it didn't really work then, as far as I can see.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yes, definitely there is scope for regional events around, the world. I mean, Colombia, I think one of the other things I'm really, really proud about, and I know Martin and I both feel the same about this, is that we have inspired bird fairs literally almost on every continent, and they all come back and say, oh, yes, it's great, fantastic, if it hadn't been for your inspiration, blah, 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 they would have, this wouldn't have happened. What has happened, and I think not pointing any fingers whatsoever, but a lot of bird fairs, national ones, the one in Scotland, the one in Holland, for example, they're basically there were too many chiefs and not enough Indians trying to organize these events. And this is why I think, we have been so successful in that basically, we were a tiny team, basically, initially, Martin and I, as two people with lots of passion, and not being interfered by our two organizations. The Wildlife Trust and the RSPB played a minute part for many, many, many years of the bird fair. And it's only in recent years when, of course, things change and people see the opportunities that, you get more interference. We had a very, very good bird fair staff, and the staff at Rutland Water have been incredible. They have been very, very supportive. And I believe there is still an opportunity for a national event or an event to be held in the UK that will still emulate what Bird Fair has achieved. And I don't think it's the end of Bird Fair. I think there are opportunities. I have to say that I have been approached, as you can imagine, on on a number of occasions, not just recently, but on previous occasions, to reconsider, having a bird fair elsewhere. I believe there's great opportunity. I mean, I mentioned Colombia just now. I know in Colombia, they have about 8 different bird fairs, and they call them bird fairs, in Colombia alone, and it's for local people to enjoy. Not everyone is going to be able to travel to Rutland Water or wherever another big event is going to be held. But the one in up north in Martin Mere, is a great event. It keeps going. The Spurn event as well, the MIGFest, I think it's called. Great event, in encouraging local people and inspiring people to go birding. And that's what really we need to do. But we do need a vehicle, I think, to channel the sort of monies that Bird Fair can achieve through sponsorship, through the attendance, and the passion that people have for this event.
So are you saying that, there is scope and a need for regional bird fairs, but are you also saying that there should be one central event that kind of galvanizes sponsors and all those people? And if so, do you not think that the atmosphere has changed now? Do you think that, since we're going through a pandemic now, and there are people who are probably nervous about being in an environment where there's loads of other people. Do you think that the appetite for such an event has waned? Do you think that time has moved on now? Do you think that there could ever be? I know you've said that there could be, but do you really think that there could ever be something again similar to Bird Fair, given what we've gone through?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as long as they're all football fans, you've got to go and see, Manchester United playing in front of an audience of about 100,000 people, non-mask or whatever. I mean, that's a crazy thing to say. But yes, I definitely believe there is. We are again going through a difficult time with the new variant, but we're learning from this, and maybe the first events that go forward are not going to be like 20, 30,000 people coming. But the response I've seen on social media is a huge demand. I mean, we're even getting people saying, can we have a crowdfunding event to get enough money to get this thing back up and running again? So there's a huge support out there, a huge group of people who see it not just the sort of commercial side, but see it for the reasons that they want to go and see their friends again. They want to make new friends. They want to talk about the birds they saw, whether it's in Costa Rica or Mongolia or, at Rutland Water. There's definitely a way forward that we've got to bring people back together again. Birding isn't just a solitude thing. Birding is about sharing your passion. And I believe, we can do something. And I'm determined to help whoever wants to take this on to ensure that we do something very special in the future.
Yeah, I mean, towards the end of the Bird Fair life, I kind of got the impression that it was becoming a bit more kind of almost nationalistic in that, for example, on the travel side of things, there seemed to be all of a sudden this, from where I'm standing, I might be completely wrong, but it felt as if the larger companies in the UK were muscling out the smaller guys who came from Peru, Cambodia, whatever, to advertise their tours, made it more difficult for those people to attend. And I had visions of it being a situation where there were like 5 different tour companies and that was it. And I thought, for myself, I thought that Bird Fair, you walk around in the marquees and you get flavors of all these different countries. You walk into an area and there's Latin America, you got Colombia and Guatemala and all those places, and Australia. It's just, you get all these flavors. And then I felt that, I don't know whether it is actually due to some kind of legislation or due to maybe Brexit now, but it felt as if that stuff wouldn't happen again. And for me, that was a major part of the Bird Fair experience, because you were meeting people, from all over, actually talking to the horse's mouth when it came to tourism. Yeah. And I know we have, for example, Andy Tucker here from Nature Trek. So it'd be really interesting to get your view on this, because, I need to be educated on this, because my feeling was that, the bigger companies were pushing out the smaller operators. I don't know if that's true or not.
Well, I mean, hopefully Andy and maybe Chris Larson from Blue Sky would, would want to comment on this. I mean, basically what happened in 2018, the package travel regulations were brought in, and that certainly was to ensure that any operator, big or large or whatever, or small, safeguarded the clients that they were taking, on birding tours, whether it's in the UK or, as you say, in Guatemala or Costa Rica or wherever. And there were difficulties initially. There was a lot of heart searching as to how we could still maintain the number and diversity of countries that were offering, because we all know, and I would like to think that we have an audience here that knows exactly the value of ecotourism and what it does and saves wildlife and habitats around the world. It's absolutely critical, I believe, to continue that. And, the regulations were brought in, and the likes of, I know, Blue Sky and 2x2 were offering smaller companies the opportunity to link in with them to safeguard their future by offering the protection they needed through insurance and through the various travel regulations. Now, again, I mean, I was there to run a bird fair, not get too involved in the travel regulations, but we got through it. I certainly didn't see much decline in the number of companies, and certainly in the last 2019 bird fair, that the feeling that you've just mentioned, this feeling of international gathering, it's like walking down the little high street in our little town in Oakham over the bird fair weekend. You could hear 20 different languages. You could hear all these people interacting. And of course, that's one thing very quickly I will mention. The loss of bird fair to our community is worth 1.2 to 1.3 million pounds. We've even had our local MP on television complaining about this decision to stop the bird fair. I digress a little bit there, I know, David, but if anyone is ready to talk about it.
It'll be good to hear from, if Andy Tucker, for example, from Nature Trek could come and talk to us about, from his perspective, and also to explain, how you feel about bird fair and the way forward. Would you be up?
Yeah, evening everybody. It's so nice to see so many familiar names and faces on my screen. Great to have this community on this evening for this fascinating discussion. Yeah, I'll give you a couple of general thoughts, but first of all, to tackle that particular question, David, and this notion that the UK tour operating scene somehow ousted international visitors or competitors or whatever you want to call them. And that's absolutely not the case. We greatly welcome the international community, and actually over the course of many years exhibiting at the bird fair, we've done a great deal of business there, working with new lodges, recruiting tour leaders, coming up with new products. It was in our interests to have that diversity there. And as Tim has rightly said, this is all down to the package travel regulations. And once trading standards got wind of the presence at the bird fair of people who weren't bonded under the UK package travel regulations, they started to sniff around and made bird fair's life particularly difficult. But this had absolutely nothing to do with Nature Trek or other UK tour operators. Let's be absolutely categorically clear on that. Regarding the news last week, generally, very disappointed to read the email from Leicestershire and Rutland Wildlife Trust. I don't know whether there's anyone on from the Trust this evening to explain their position, but yeah, deeply disappointing. It's been a part of my life for over 20 years. Nature Trek has been there since, I think, year 2. We've been a sponsor for the best part of 20 years. Always felt part of the bird fair family with Tim and the bird fair office. Fantastic team there. So yeah, a huge degree of sadness this week. International conservation and biodiversity is the loser. We'd like to see a place for bird fair in the future. As an international tour operator, we've come under fire because point 3 of the Wildlife Trust's reason for doing away with the bird fair, if you remember, point 1 was financial risk and exposure. Point 2 was soil compaction on an SSSI at Rutland. And point 3 was the international carbon footprint of such a fair. And as Tim has alluded to, and you won't be surprised to hear me say this, we firmly believe that the positive impact of international ecotourism far outweighs any negatives, including the carbon footprint. But of course, we have to mitigate our emissions. And most responsible tour operators are doing just that. But it's international conservation, which is the main loser here, as well as the opportunity, as some of you have said, to meet face-to-face with friends each August. It's a part of the fabric of August in the UK, and it's a great shame, and we're all deeply saddened to receive the news.
What do you see the way forward looking like? Do you think the future, certainly in the UK, is a series of regional bird fairs, or for want of better words, up and down the country? And if so, how's that going to work? Would you, for example, as an organisation, as a company, be exhibiting at all of them, or how would it work?
Well, emulating bird fair in the UK is not an easy task. We've seen people come along and try to emulate Tim and Martin's success, not least at in Barnes in West London, which lasted for a couple of years. And there have been other fairs that have come and gone, but it's very, very difficult, I feel, to get traction. Bird fair is very difficult to follow. For me personally, I think Tim's face needs to be behind any kind of resurrection. And I saw the writing on the wall when we realised that Tim and the Leicestershire and Rutland Wildlife Trust hadn't come to an agreement to include Tim as an ambassadorial figure. Once Tim retired and they split ways, I thought to myself, that's Bird Fair dead, because Tim's face is Bird Fair. So in the future, I do think there will be demand for one national event. I think smaller regional events will crop up, but none will ever reach the scale of following of the national event. I think there will be demand for a successor. I hope Tim's involved in some way. If he is, it will be a success.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Andy, for your comments. Really appreciate that. Jeff Price had his hand up. Jeff.
So on point 3, it's the way I like to put it. I've been working on climate change and biodiversity since the 1990s. I've been on IPCC since the third assessment report. And so I feel I'm in a really good position to address this point and the arguments that have been coming up. And basically, point 3 is trying to cure cancer with a Band-Aid and ignoring the massive puncture wound on the other side. If you really sat down and tried to deal with just climate change, we would lose most biodiversity.
Exactly.
Because you would plant so many of the wrong kinds of trees in the wrong places. And all of those people who think it's greenwashing to say, well, let's do what World Land Trust is doing, we'll offset the emissions, ignore the fact that if you're going to try to plant 1 trillion trees, besides knowing where you need to plant them for the best biodiversity, where is the money going to come from? And so it's a very narrow view that's ignoring the fact that, you know, Leicestershire and Rutland Wildlife Trust can go forward with their 30% plans for Leicestershire, which will make a minuscule difference for climate change and biodiversity, and ignoring the £5 million that have been raised for biodiversity globally to save biodiversity. We're in both a climate change emergency and a biodiversity emergency. And Bird Fair did a tremendous good and could continue to do a tremendous good if it went forward, and we could deal with these issues.
Okay, so you're basically saying that the reason in terms of the climate change reason wasn't really up to scratch for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was a point we tried in the last virtual Bird Fair. Rob set up what was supposed to be a panel discussion, but very few people actually came to actually debate the point. I think it was the British Wildlife article, which was really poorly thought through. And it doesn't cover the fact that this is a very deep topic and you can't take a shallow solution to it.
Yeah.
All right, just before I bring in Tim again, let's quickly hear, thank you, by the way, Jeff. Let's hear from Nigel Scott. Nigel.
Hi, thanks, David.
Hello, sir.
I've been a volunteer at Bird Fair for, I think we worked out about 19, 20 years now. But my day job for the last 30 years has been in charity finance. So the one thing that struck me in the statement that was made by LRWT last week was the complete nonsense of the cost elements, etc. If I was to sit down and do a cost-benefit analysis of Bird Fair, I would have to put on the positive side the awareness of Rutland Water around the world, the awareness of the Osprey project there, and the kudos that running Bird Fair at Rutland Water gives to LRWT. So I feel, and I've been making this point on the bird guides in a discussion there and other places, that, you know, there's something in the background that the statement put out by LRWT did not ring true from any basis. As Jeff said, the climate change issue, for me, the cost issue, there's no genuine reason in that statement. What I think is needed is that Bird Fair needs to become an independent organization. It's been there as a structure, but for example, it's not a registered charity in its own right. Perhaps it should be, or just a company in its own right, which would enable it to go out and get investment, grant funding, etc., to begin to rebuild. And that may be the route to go down. And I'm quite happy to help with that. I've been running charities for 30 years. I know how to structure those things. So taking it forward, yeah, let's look at something new and a new structure. I agree with the point about regional ones, but a national event is the one that really draws. And a national event is the only one that will really focus on global ecotourism and bring people in. It brought me into birding, brought me into, I can see Martin Kelsey on here, been birding with him a lot, got me into BirdLife International and into the Rare Bird Club and into supporting birds that I'd never even heard of, which is brilliant. And that is necessary for the next generation. So let's build it up and get it done again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nigel. Very good to see you as well. So Tim, I know you may not be able to speak on some of those subjects, but what's your feeling?
I'm delighted to hear and delighted to see many of my friends joining us this evening. I would very much like John Bruno to come in here. John, I met at a conference in China a couple of years ago and was so inspired by his inspiration that, he is the chief executive of Ecotourism Society in the States, and would, I'm sure, give us another approach to where he thinks bird fair goes and the value of bird fair. So if John is there, which I believe he is, can you bring him in, please? If he's willing to, that is. Maya, are you there, John?
Oh, we can't hear you.
Oh, is he on mute?
No, I'm off mute.
Oh, we can hear you now. So.
Okay.
Thanks, John.
First of all, it's an honor to be with the assembled group. I also see a lot of folks here that I admire from around the world. And as the executive director of the International Ecotourism Society, I want to state, as far as what I've heard so far, that birders are extremely key constituents for ecotourism. Recently visited Hilton Head, and they've had ecotourism programs since what would be called ecotourism programs since the 1960s. And they've been very, very concerned about their birds, and they have a wildlife sanctuary there. So ecotourism and birding developed hand in hand. And probably the most passionate eco-travelers are birders. And they're the ones that work for conservation in tourism, and they work for guide certification, and they work for infrastructure. And what we've seen recently is in the last 10 years is ecotourism is providing sometimes half the income to small island states around the world. So I think, I can say it here that I think the idea that bird fair negatively contributed is very misguided. I agree with the previous commenters that, in fact, it produced a great net positive globally and was very helpful to ecotourism growth globally, and that ecotourism, which is seen as the best form of tourism by IUCN, by Conservation International, by many of the large NGOs, and many other groups as well, has been absolutely reliant on the passion of birders to get where it is today. So I think bird fair was and is a vital, necessary event, and I think I'm hearing a lot of ideas about how it can be continued. I think we're ready to step in as well if we can, and make a positive difference for it going forward.
John, let me ask you a question. Thanks very much for that comment, by the way. But
sure.
I've been seeing a lot of stuff online about about the demise of bird fair, and I mean, obviously, there's been a lot of people saying, "Oh, I miss it," and let's do another one. But there's been a lot of people out there also talking about the eco-tourism side of it and the carbon footprint, and basically, you know, slating people for actually even considering going away to see any kind of wildlife, and actually questioning. In fact, I read a report talking about being agnostic to the idea of ecotourism. Can you firstly define what is ecotourism? And secondly, you know, is there a situation where, for example, tourist boards are turning around and saying, yes, come to our country and visit this area?
I'm Siri, here to help.
Sorry, can everyone turn their mics off, please? I'm getting all sorts of feedback here. But basically, John, is it a situation where tourism boards are saying these things, but the actual money that is raised from the tourism is not going to local people? You know, how can someone like myself or a consumer recognize a bona fide, you know, ecotourism trip or tour?
Well, the simplest definition and around the world that's used is happens to be ours, and it is tourism that benefits the community in which the tourism takes place. That includes conservation, education, and interpretation. And what that means is that the travelers are responsible for seeing the destination through the light of the community, through the eyes of the community, not imposing their own cultures and ideas on the community. It means that the traveler has to seek to make a positive effect, not, you know, as they say in the medical profession, primum non nuncere, you know, first do no harm. That isn't what we're looking for. We're looking for a net positive effect. And that's not easy. So yes, you're absolutely right. There are many instances where ecotourism is, something is called ecotourism and it isn't. But what I've seen, my personal experience is that those are baby steps on the way to something better. To address your comment about destinations, what I see, and this is all around the world, I'll give you a perfect example. Out in the South Pacific, there are some tiny islands in the Micronesian states, and 50% of not their net imports, but their GDP comes from tourism. If we were to suddenly, how else are you going to get there? If we were to suddenly say, let's not go there anymore, we would collapse the economies and put a lot of people into penury that don't want to be there. So they're very much asking for sustainable practices to care for their culture, their land, and their people. But what they're saying is, don't stop tourism, be better tourists. And they really are saying that. So there's an island, an Atoll, and it's one of the most beautiful things you'll see. It has a water in and water outside, and then, you know how an atoll is, that beautiful beaches on both sides. So what they're asking for is sustainable tourism to come there and develop it. They know that sustainable tourists are respectful, that they have a higher spend, that they obey laws, and that they're cleaner, that they don't leave a lot of problems. So in answer to your question, I've dealt with governments in the last 2 months on all 5 continents. And every one of them is honestly seeking how to implement sustainable tourism in a positive way. I have yet to see a case anywhere where someone has contacted me about it and asked me about it where they're greenwashing. Does it exist? Absolutely. But as I said, I think it's important to understand that some of that is just fumbling around on the way to a better place. I hope that makes sense.
Finally, I mean, what can someone say to or answer to someone else criticizing them for going on a trip to observe nature? What can you say to that person criticizing you?
I would say, and I do say, that travel is growing dramatically, that it's going to continue to grow. It's arguably the world's largest industry. It's anywhere between the first and the fourth, and its net economic effect is $5-6 trillion, 7 if you believe the UNWTO. So you're not going to stop travel. And our job is, and everyone's job is, if we care about our planet, to make every industry better. And that means We have to ask for better fuel standards. And by the way, those fuel standards are improving all the time. We have to ask, as a previous commenter mentioned, are our mitigation steps actually positive? And we have to ask in the eco-travel industry, when we say we're benefiting a community, are we actually benefiting it? As you pointed out earlier, is the money staying in the community? Are these people choosing this type of tourism? And that means we have to be asking ourselves, I really have to, this is a strong criticism, and I apologize for what I'm about to say, but we have to decolonialize thinking about destinations, especially indigenous destinations, saying, I know what's best for them. We have to give them the agency. We have to give them the information, and we have to give them the power to determine their own futures. And if they say they want tourism, some do and some don't, then we have to respect that. And we have to allow respectful, positive, beneficial tourism, sustainable tourism to take place. And what I'm saying here today is that bird fair and birding organizations are today, and have for the last 30 years, led the charge towards sustainable tourism globally.
Okay, thanks very much for your answers, John. Claire Evans, I believe you got a question or two questions for Tim.
I did, yes. Yeah, I was just asking whether the reasons that they gave, because when I read those reasons, I kind of thought this doesn't really add up. The 3 reasons they gave for stopping bird fair were valid or just excuses? I mean, we've sort of discussed the climate change one. There was the soil compaction and the funding, because I saw, as you have already said, bird fair being a huge positive to the whole birding environment, to tourism, the international aspect of it, far outweighed that sort of small, oh, it's compacting the soil, it's expensive to put on, and the huge team of volunteers. So do you think they were valid reasons or not? Or just excuses?
I'm sorry to say, I believe there are excuses. I mean, I've worked for that organization for a long time, and I respect a huge amount of work that they've done locally and in the, up until recently, supported, the only wildlife trust, when you think how small Rutland is and part of Leicestershire, to actually have the foresight to look at, global conservation. The soil compaction is complete nonsense. We have to get natural England. It's a SSSI, it's a special protection area. We have to get a license and agreement from Natural England to hold it. That license is given, so there's no problem there. Financially, it's never cost the trust any money, because Bird Fair pays the salaries of the people, and it pays the salaries for the Wildlife Trust Rutland water staff for 2 months of the year during the course of the year. So, I mean, that's 2 good reasons. Sadly, I think they just, I mean, I'll be honest about this. 2 years ago, I retired as a reserve manager in 2017. Absolutely fantastic. I've done all these years, but I then retained the managerial of bird fair, working for 3-4 days a week. It always ended up at 8 days a week, but that's neither here nor there. So then there was various changes at the top. I won't go into any of the details, but suddenly they wanted to terminate my contract, but offer me what they considered a lucrative opportunity as a consultant. Again, I turned that down for lots of reasons. And of course, since then, COVID, of course, has taken over. Someone did refer to the virtual bird fair, which I know some of the staff put a lot of hard work into, but again, it was extremely unsuccessful, I'm afraid to say. And, we've moved on from that. So I believe, sadly, it's an excuse. They haven't really got anyone there now, I think, to actually take on the mantle. And dare I say, you do need a figurehead. Okay, I've been that figurehead for a long time, but there must be other figureheads around. There must be people who are passionate to do that. And what I would like to see happen, and I've put my cards on the table, is that maybe I can get involved in a bird fair for a year or two. Many of you will know already that I launched Global Birding 18 months ago, which has gone viral, basically. I mean, it's been absolutely fantastic. You know, I mean, with Global Birding, I'll very quickly give you a quick advert, David. Sorry about this. But
I didn't realise you'd have to pay for this. It costs.
Oh, well, I haven't sent you the bill for this interview yet, so we'll work out some sort of deal, shall we? I'll give you a Global Birding badge. There's one just there. So basically, Global Birding, we've linked in with BirdLife again to raise money, because that's what I really passionately want to do. We support a project. We had 195 countries take part last month. 33,000 people went out and saw, 7,276 species in a single day. But it inspired, we had all these communities from remote parts of the world. And, you know, in a way, it's a sort of, it's a global bird fair, but we call it Global Birding. But going back to the actual question, what I really want to do is to find and train up someone who really wants to, you know, run the bird fair, whether it's at Rutland. I mean, obviously, there's a huge swell of support to have it still in Rutland for the simple reason, you know, as I think someone mentioned, probably Nigel mentioned, that, you know, the infrastructure is here. The whole road system is good. We have public transport, which again is a moan by some people, you know, too many cars coming, but you can get on a train, you can get buses, you know, there are opportunities to get here. We're close to two airports. So, you know, Rutland is the ideal location. Let's see what happens in the future. But, you know, thank you for that question, Claire, because, you know, I'm trying to be honest about this, how I see the situation at the moment, and hopefully that answers your question.
I think one of the biggest insults on that press release was the fact that neither yourself or Martin Davis were actually even mentioned by name in terms of thank you very much for creating this thing for us to actually cancel. So I found that very, very, very offensive personally. But anyway, moving on, Norby Lopez, I believe you have your hand up and a question or a statement or both.
Thank you, David, and hello to everyone from Ecuador in South America. First, I applaud your initiative to gather us all together wherever you are in this conversation and talk. But then also, I would like to, I'm coming from being a co-founder of a lodge, the Napa Wildlife Center in Amazonia, Ecuador, who is funded by donations. I think, and I'll probably be challenging team again on the new project. It is, why not making the British birdwatching fair elsewhere, aside from the new chapters that could be refunded in the UK? I believe there's the need of a world-class event as the British birdwatching fair is being over the last 32 years. But then also, I believe, for the reason that I'm saying, you know, coming out from being a co-founder of a project that was created by donations, like why not take the bird fair to selected destinations where you can bring, you know, all these exhibitors and also participants or attendees and visitors that dynamize the economy of these remote, impressive natural areas, and that guarantees that the money, whether it is by decision of some operators, I understand it wasn't that, but maybe because of regulations in the EU or the UK with the Brexit, if you do the event elsewhere, you know, in certain editions or other chapters every other year or so, it'll truly be contributing genuinely, directly to the destinations and all the actors that are there that are highly needed of this kind of dynamic, not only economically, but also empowering them, as John mentioned very clearly and you know, rightfully, the lives and the territories of local people that are surrounded by extreme biodiverse areas that are at peril. So that was my comment. Thank you so much.
So are you basically saying to have to make it sort of international and sort of place it in different areas, that it's almost like parachute in a festival in the area that's where there's need for development in terms of, you know, ecotourism and habitat protection?
Yes, yes, David, because if we put things in perspective, you know, the British tradition of seeing birds, you know, from hunting to seeing birds now to observing birds is been on since the 1800s. And birding, as John clearly pointed out, is probably the strongest ambassador nature tourism that triggers all types of other activities in nature tourism. I was amazed the first time that I went to the British Birdwatching Fair when NAPO opened its doors in 2003. It was to see the you know, Orchid Society of London, the Dragonfly Society of England, and things like that that occur in areas where people are willing to go to remote places and explore them respectfully and contributing directly to local economies, not just financially, but again, reinforcing the territories of extreme biodiverse areas of the world. So I believe that aside from the need of having a national or a world-class event as British Birdwatching Fair has been over the last 32 years, there's probably the need now, with the pandemic and everything else and all the challenges that climate change will bring to us, to bring it elsewhere, you know, okay. Merge it with some event like, you know, we work with Tim in Colombia before Bill Thompson expired, unfortunately. And Tim mentioned under a question that someone did that, would you agree that there's the need of more festivals and more bird fairs in the world? And Tim said, yes, yes. And just have your theme or have your you know, proposal different from others, and bring forth how you built around, you know, your audience. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Norby. So Tim, what's your feeling regarding having sort of an international bird fair that kind of moves from region in the world to region in the world?
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Norby, for your comments, and much respected. And I know Norby's doing some great stuff. And we have now a bird fair in Ecuador. Now, the big difference is how many people are going to attend a bird fair in Ecuador, or the South American Bird Fair, which has just taken place, the Extremadura Bird Fair, the Doñana Bird Fair, compared to the 20,000 plus people that are going to come to the British Bird Fair. You know, there are thousands and thousands of people who birdwatch in the UK. And I think this is the big difference. I've been to, unfortunately, a number of international bird fairs, and they've been brilliant. They've been very much targeted at local people, local projects. I mean, the Columbia Bird Fair, you know, the main Columbia Bird Fair is phenomenal, but the actual attendance is relatively small. I think you've got to have a focal event globally that is sort of in one location. You've also got to think about actually running it. You've got to think about, you know, the infrastructure. You know, the great thing about, I would say, the company that we've used for years at Bird Fair, I could go away for the weekend and all the tents would be up because they know exactly which tent pole goes here, et cetera, et cetera. So I believe there is already some great bird fairs. They've got to be national. And I think you've got, you might well, like you at the moment, you've got the expo going on in Uganda, which will encompass quite a lot of the African countries, I guess.
Can I just interrupt you?
Yeah.
Sorry, Tim, can I just interrupt you? Just on the point of actually how the involvement of the actual organisation of these things. I mean, Zul Batia has asked a question which is relevant to what you're talking about now, which is, you know, how many people and organisations are directly involved, and how much time do they contribute? And, you know, to get an idea, if anyone's out there thinking about creating something themselves, just how big this task is.
Okay, well, I mean, to give you an idea how Bird Fair has run, there were, for many, many years, there was basically me and someone helping, you know, for a short period of time, but then lots and lots of volunteers. But since it's really grown, we've had 4 of us running it, 3 women and me. So, you know, heavily orientated towards the opposite sex, which I'm told is a very good thing to be. And then, of course, we had 350 volunteers. You know, Nigel Scott's already mentioned his involvement. And I'm sure, I'd like to think there are other volunteers watching this program now. So the volunteer side of it is very important. And volunteers who not just, you get a turnover of volunteers, but you get key volunteers who can take responsibility for certain aspects of the event, whether it's helping to put up, you know, stands, whether it's car parking. There are so many things to think about. And that's why at the moment here in Rutland, we've got this core of volunteers who can, you know, you snap your fingers and they know exactly, oh, I should be there, I should be doing that. And that's a big problem. The cost of it, of putting on a bird fair, is massive. Obviously, I mean, our marquee bill was somewhere in the region of about £200,000 every year, you know, 60, 70, 80,000 pounds for putting in the power, the electricity, toilets and all that sort of stuff like that. So there's a big infrastructure to think about. But, you know, if you've got, as we have, and have had, I should say, I suppose, contractors who are also supportive, you know, they love it. You know, their staff fight amongst themselves to be involved in the bird fair because they know it's just a great place and a great organization and, you know, somewhere they want to be working. So it's a really difficult one to nail down. And I think this is why it's failed in a number of other places that, you know, we've got, you know, there's just not enough infrastructure and you know, to get it off the ground, you know, unless it grows very small. But look at, you know, the actual events that are going on already. You know, have they grown? Probably not. And I mean the smaller regional ones.
Yeah. I mean, I've noticed that too. Hugh Connick, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, cheers, David. It was just to jump in. Hi. It's just to jump in really and sort of say, look, it's amazing that this event's happening tonight. It's pulled together a lot of people, and just goes to show the power of bird fair over its generation has pulled in people from all over the world, and that's a common thread of communicating and sharing knowledge and experiences. And I travelled to bird fair very late in my life. It was actually 2019, just before lockdown. Took my young family there for the first time. And it was just an absolute and amazing experience. My daughter's 7 and 12, and I was just as excited as them. They had a phenomenal experience. They met and saw lots of people that read about in magazines, BBC Wildlife, yourself, Tim, lots of other people. And it always takes me back to the first time I went to places like Slimbridge as a kid. You know, looking at the environmental impact of traveling aside, those experiences grounded me and fundamentally gave me the passion to pursue a career in conservation and wildlife. And, you know, it was a bit of disappointment around the dinner table when I told the girls that there wouldn't be another bird fair, and they thought I was joking. And, you know, that's the power of an event like that, is that if these things don't continue, the challenge is how do you run them? That's a challenge. There's enough smart people around how to make these events run in a sustainable way. But you know, the power of these events to bring people together and inspire people, I think, is crucial. You know, I work in agriculture as well, and the highlights of our agricultural year were always the agricultural shows, getting together, meeting people, and building your own experiences. So it's a shame that it's ended, but I think from everybody's talking here tonight, I've got a feeling that it's going to resurrect its way somehow in the next couple of years, and be really positive.
Hugh, do you think there's another way? Do you think that there's something out there that hasn't really been thought of yet? Do you think that perhaps, for example, there could be a hybrid whereby there is a mixture of live event with Zoom, because obviously that's now become a main feature of our lives these days.
Yeah, look, I think that anything is possible. I think the paradigm shift is now happening, in that it's ended. The focus is now on how do you take it forward, bring innovation, bring these things together, and open it up. I mean, there's going to be people who are going to come forward with phenomenal ideas. So I think, yeah, there's definitely that potential.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for your comments, Hugh, and let's hope that something happens in the future for all of us to be at. Can I call in David Chandler, DC? Good evening to you, David.
Good evening to you, DJ. So, Tim, a question for you. I mean, I've been to pretty well every bird fair, and it's a highlight of the year. Big disappointment, of course, what's going on at the moment. So I'm thinking slightly laterally and just thinking, how important do you think it is for the venue to be a nature reserve?
Oh, well, a very good question. I mean, I think personally, I think it has to be on a natural area. Okay, I believe that the optics companies would very much like to have a very good viewing, which of course has been one of the key points and why we get so many optical companies sponsoring the fair. And the optics marquee, which turns over lots and lots of money, and of course we get a kickback on all of that money. A percentage comes back into the bird fair, which then goes on into the project. So I believe it's only right that it doesn't necessarily have to be a nature reserve. It could be, by a river somewhere, or it could be, somewhere where there's a view. You feel you're in nature. I think that's the key thing. You could have it at the NEC, or you could have it at the what's the one in London, the XL. But there's been no feel for that. It become then another trade event. We want people to be sitting outside as they do, having a beer in the evenings, talking it through. I mean, Dame Barbara Young, who many of you UK people will know, who was head of the RSPB, said to me many, many years ago, I can sit if I sat in a key location at Bird Fair, I could do more business and meet more people than I do in a whole year, doing my day job, running the RSPB. So, it's the bringing of people together. And that's why I don't like the idea of Zooms in that sense. It's great for this sort of, passionate speaking, and now for different people to give their own opinions. But there's nothing better than actually talking something through. And it would be impossible to quantify what has happened, around in the beer tent, in the various places where people have eaten, their meals and stuff at Bird Fair, in local hotels in the evenings, the meetings that were being held. It was a one time when, a lot of the companies could bring their staff together, in a convivial atmosphere, but at the same time do business. And I would just love to be able to say, wow, how many billions of money almost has Bird Fair generated? We know that, our 5 million has actually generated a further 35 million. And that's a point not many people realize. It's literally by the 5 million that we've given, or 5.5 million we've given BirdLife International, they then use that money to seed other projects, and get more money from the World Bank and different organizations, up to £40 million. And that came from Patricia Zurita, the CEO's mouth. So, she knows what's happened there. So, yeah, I thank you for that question, David. Good to see you, looking well. And let's hope we meet again in a beer tent at a bird fair somewhere.
Sounds good.
So thank you very much, David, for your question. I've been thinking about this, and I'm wondering if there is going to be another kind of a bird fair replacement, or a bird fair, 0.2. How soon could that happen? And in the meantime, what would happen not only to the market, i.e. to all the people who, I suppose, based their economy half the time on what happened at Bird Fair in terms of sales and bookings or what have you. What will happen to that market, and also what will happen to the actual people that attended? Do you think that, you know, if 2 years down the line suddenly it reopens again in another form, will people start rushing back as they were before, and, you know, will carry on as before? I still think personally, but the world has changed a little bit. But what's your view, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's opportunities to have other aspects of an event. I think there is. I'm not sure, David. I mean, you know, Bird Fair right up to 2019, the last one, there was unbelievably successful. You know, there was, you know, we were slowly making changes. We were involving more children. We were more, you know, we had these incredible debates. We were bringing young people through. So, you know, it's a difficult question to answer, because I, again, believe that the formula that Bird Fair had was the correct formula. I mean, there's no two ways about it. You know, the fact that we're here today talking about it. So don't always change something for the sake of change, you know, would be my comment. Now, that may come from an old-fashioned old chap like me, but, you know, and I know that you've been talking, or we're going to get involved in a bird fair or bird event at Walthamstow in just outside London, which would be absolutely brilliant. A London Bird Festival would be fantastic. But I still believe there's a place for Bird Fair, bringing in the greater public and inspiring them to, you know, love birds, buy products, go on holidays, talk to each other, join NGOs. And I think, you know, was it Norby, I think, made comment about the fact he came and he saw the Dragonfly Society, you know, and then of course, remember, Bird Fair was Bird Fair, but we had the Dragonfly Society, we had the Mammal Society, the Butterfly Society, you know, the Acnorids, you know, you name it. You know, it wasn't a closed shop to birds. We were inspiring people to love all aspects of the natural world.
Okay, Zul Batia, and I hope I pronounced your name properly. Is it Zul?
That's okay. That's okay.
How do you pronounce it?
I'm sorry, I'm kind of speaking out of ignorance, because I've never been to the bird fair, but I have been around a long time. But I do know Tanzania, and to answer a couple of questions. One, I know for a fact that in Tanzania, those national parks and wild places would soon disappear if they didn't get tourist revenue. So the tourist revenue is incredibly vital to keep those parks open. Travel is we all care about the climate. Travel is an issue, carbon footprints, etc. But the biggest carbon footprints, I would say, people doing, you know, a weekend in Prague or flying from Glasgow to London repeatedly, all those sort of things, which I think are kind of luxuries, and we should be going on the train to London, for example. I think we can get too carried away with thinking about the carbon footprints of visiting Tanzania. It's just vital for those sites to have those tourists. So it's really, really important. But sometimes those same people from Tanzania, I know that Birding Tanzania got to the bird fair in 2019, but it took them 5 years of pleading with the Foreign Office to get a visa to come to bird fair. So sometimes there are huge difficulties in little countries. So yeah, Tanzania is quite a big country, but anyway, lesser known countries to come and visit bird fair. And I don't know, maybe bird fair should be more proactive in trying to encourage those countries that haven't been before to come along. The other thing, I think it would be good, and again, I'm speaking out of ignorance, if there was a strong mentoring aspect of the bird fair. So, you know, like Tim has mentioned about training people up to be successors sort of thing. If that was a regular constituent part of all aspects of bird fair, then I think that would be brilliant. So,
okay.
Anyway.
Can I come in there just quickly? I mean, one of the things I spent quite a lot of time doing was writing letters of support to different countries, including Tanzania, to take it along to the embassies to say, look, this is a genuine company. They're coming to promote, tourism in your country, etc. And it wasn't just, I mean, in lots of countries I was doing this. So, we were very much there, giving as much support, as we could. So, and that will, that continued. And eventually, the Foreign Office or the embassies, would give permission. But, we also had a massive demand. The waiting list at times for stand space was phenomenal. I mean, sometimes there were over, at one point, I think we had over 200, people on a waiting list wanting to come to the fair. So, I mean, again, that demonstrates, but again, we tried wherever possible. I would always put a new country, on the top of the list, even if they hadn't sort of been waiting for 5 years, because, to get that diversity, and particularly countries that I knew that, needed the support, needed the exposure that the fair could give them.
Great. And finally, a kind of difficult question for Tim. In view of what some people have said about the Wildlife Trust press statement and the sort of dodgy things they said, would it be still practical to have a replacement bird fair on the same site?
I think they've made it clear that they don't want to have it on that particular part of Rutland Water. So let's have let's leave that for the moment, because there are other areas. And of course, one has to remember that this whole site is owned by the water company, Anglian Water, who are very supportive to the conservation of the site. The fact that they fund all the work that Rutland Water, that Leicestershire and Rutland Water do at Rutland Water Nature Reserve. They fund all the staff there, including mine via the Wildlife Trust. So I'm sure that they're very conscious of the exposure the bird has done, the bird fair has done for Rutland Water and the company. I had an email from a guy called Michael Webster, who some of you I'm sure will know, who was a very strong supporter of the Wildlife Trust. He's just moved to Canada recently, and he was saying, he mentioned where he came from, and he said, "Oh, you've never heard of it." And the bloke said, "Oh, he said, where is it? Rutland." "Oh, what do you mean where they hold that bird fair thing?" And in fact, as a result of the connection somehow with Canada, I was on CBC the other day talking about the event and interviewed about, and the demise. So the whole sort of thing has gone global.
Okay, thank you very much for your questions, Zul. We've got a couple more to go before we wrap up tonight. I'd like to hear from Beltran, who had his hand up.
Well, hello everyone. Thank you, David, for giving us the opportunity of... Buenas noches, amigo. Muchas gracias por darnos la oportunidad de tener esta reunión hoy. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity of having this lovely meeting today. Well, two things are for sure. Tim has said that something similar has to be done. And I think we all agree on that. And another thing that is for sure is that Tim is the key person. I'm not so sure that Tim has to be the person who has to move the second edition or the second part of it. Because, I mean, I know that Tim has lots of friends and lots of very positive things, but I'm absolutely sure that Tim, as everyone who works in conservation and works in active ways, has lots of problems, enemies, and etc., 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 etc. So we say in Spain that if you have a problem and if you don't have the solution, you have two problems. So why don't we look for the solution? And perhaps the solution I would like to put on the table today is that I don't know if it will be a bad idea. I have heard today that perhaps a special association that is related to making a fair should be done. Well, it's an international association already, not officially done, but it does exist because it's an international association of Friends of British Bird Fair, which is exactly the same as International Association of Tim's Friends. Both things means the same. So I don't know if the answer will be to make the effort between some people of making a special body to produce a fair that obviously has to be managed and has to be advised and has to be led by Tim Appleton, but don't give to Tim the whole responsibility of the whole work to make something that we all agree has to be done, which is something similar to British Bird Fair, because ecotourism, conservation, and countries like the main one, Spain, we have 5 local and regional bird fairs. But I remember Tim telling me, Beltran, I don't want any more Spanish regions coming because this is going to look like the Spanish bird fair in Rutland. But anyway, for Spain and for Spanish conservation, Rutland has been very important. So we have to give thanks to all of you, to Tim, to Martin, and to all the volunteers. And we have to support and we have to help to do something else. We need something like this. And I want to give that ideas. Perhaps this should be done by an international association specifically created for such a purpose. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Muchas gracias, Beltran, for your thoughts. I'm going to move slightly north of you to Martin Kelsey, who's actually in the same region as I am in Extremadura. Good evening, Martin.
Good evening. Thank you very much, David. Great to see so many friends here on the screen. And that's actually part of the beauty of Bird Fair, wasn't it? To reconnect with people and make new friends. I mean, far more effective than Facebook and no algorithms. You know, the Bird Fair was an extraordinary place to reconnect and make new friendships. John Bruno made some brilliant points about the significance of Bird Fair, and that was underlined by the sums that Tim was describing, the role that Bird Fair has played with respect to addressing the biodiversity crisis. And you know, let's face it, this is, you know, a huge crisis linked in many respects to the climate crisis, but it is of huge significance, which the Bird Fair has played a great role and should continue to do so in one form or another. Bird Fair was a magic formula, and it combined inspiring leadership with the fortune that those two people had of having hands-off employers. And I think the difference today is that there are a few charities, and Nigel, I'm sure, will agree with me here, there are a few charities that would have that sort of hands-off approach now. You know, the risk-adverse nature of trustees and the role of trustees in charities has changed that. So it would be quite difficult to imagine a situation where another organization could step in, an existing organization could step in and provide that same level of freedom that Tim and Martin enjoyed. And thus the suggestion of Nigel's that one might need to look at creating or establishing a charity or some structure that was fully committed and totally focused on the Bird Fair was a very helpful suggestion. The formula included not just the inspired leadership, but the amazing volunteers, the ability to be able to attract sponsorship so readily, the fact that all of the people attending the Bird Fair paid to go in, the entrance fees. And correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, but not a penny of government support either. So everything came from the community, from the birding community in one form or another. And that was what inspired people going to the bird fair. That's what excited people about going to the bird fair. And that's what made the bird fair so unique. Tim mentioned right at the beginning how the initial idea of the bird fair came from his visit to the game fair. And it would be interesting to hear from Tim what he knows about how the game fair is organized. I mean, what's the background behind that? I mean, is there an organization behind the game fair? They're obviously continuing to run and have done so obviously for much longer than the bird fair. It would be quite interesting in thinking about models for the future to look at an event like that.
Thank you, Martin, for putting me on the spot. To be fair, I'm not 100% sure, how it operates. I know they have had problems, and I think it did collapse one year. I think at the moment, to be fair, I don't think I can give you an honest answer on where and who organise it. They do go from stately home to stately home as a rule. So obviously, there is an infrastructure that allows the two, the events to be connected, but with different, presumably, staff to run them. So I'm not 100% sure. We're just having a quick look up to see. Let me just. It is run by the British Association for Shooting and Conservation. So quite what the attendances are. To be fair, I haven't been for a number of. Well, I haven't been back, I don't think, since then. But I will put something on my social media if anyone is interested, and see if I can get a bit more information about that. There was some other point that I wanted to talk to you about that you mentioned, and I think it was that hands-off that was so important. And I think that did give us that freedom to develop out of our own knowledge of birders and our friends. It wasn't just, thinking, oh, we'll make it, we'll do that. We had a huge amount of input from, friends, birders, around Britain who sort of gave us, their advice, but without being, on a committee. And there's one thing I do like, committees, I'm afraid. I think you can get so much more done by, your own direction, if you like.
Okay. Well, listen, I think we've kind of come to a natural end to this evening. Well, and I say an end, this will grumble on because there is no end. We don't know what's going to happen next. But I would like to say on behalf of everyone here and hopefully everyone watching this in the future, a massive thank you to Martin Davis and yourself, Tim Appleton, for creating this event, which has become such a concrete part of our lives over the last 32 years, and for me personally has not only helped me in my career but has also allowed me to meet some incredible people, open doors for both myself and for them, and I'm sure a lot of people can echo all those thoughts and more. So I'd like to thank you very much for taking your time tonight to speak to all of us about the Bird Fair. I know it's an organisation, a thing that's really close to your heart. So thank you very much, Tim.
Well, thank you, David, and thank you for all those that attended. It's been brilliant. And if anyone does want to sort of get in touch with me, please do so. rutlandappleton@gmail.com is probably the easiest way. So rutlandappleton@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. And for any sort of, inspiring ideas that you've got, I mean, I've loved some of the ideas that you've broadcast this evening. I think Nigel Scott's ideas are very positive, as you've already mentioned, but so many of our speakers have been brilliant. I think this particular conversation has been quite different perhaps from some of you've done already, and that you did get people injecting their own ideas and support. So thank you again, everybody. It's been absolutely brilliant, and see you at some future bird fair, maybe.
Absolutely. Before we Before we go, I just want to say that Zoomers, if you wish to see any more In Conservation moves, there's another one on Thursday night with a gentleman who's written a book on wasps. His name is Eric Eaton, and we were talking about a very waspy subject. So please come along. It's free of charge, and you're more than welcome. And in the meantime, take care of yourselves. Keep out of harm's way, and don't forget to keep looking up. Take care. See you again.
Hello, David. Thank you, everybody.